So this is she. And you can get a print of her as one of the rewards in the Kickstarter, in the swag pack. I mean, I've got a ton of swag, right? I have got maps. Thank you. The Kickstarter is to actually get another map of the area that the characters are going to explore in this book, made by the same artist. So who did the map? That was I'm going to really mispronounce his name, but it's Andres Uredo, I hope. And I will link his Instagram where I found him, and look at that. So he's going to do an amazing 3D map for me of the area that the guys and gals are going to explore in book 5. I've got all the books are available and at an amazing price, and I will be personalizing the Mettle of the MasterMage books with a dedication to you guys, to the people that made the Kickstarter such a success. And you will also get it in full color as well. So the books themselves, you know, they've got these wonderful covers designed by Fantastical Ink, here and here and here and here. And book 5 will go, you know, obviously the next one. And the inside, I really wanted it to be color, and that's because my best friend in all the world, she has done the chapter heading images. So you'll see that one there in the background there. That's the Rhonda plant, and that forms the chapter images, the dedication images here. So I want those ones for book 5 to be in full color. See? I want that to be in full color. Plus, I really want the character art. So can you imagine having Tuniel in her own book, looking absolutely swish, in full color inside the book? Other special tiers that we have include the I am going to be personally spraying the set. So this is one sort of option, and as you can see, I've got some others up there. This one came out really well, which is the ombre, sort of yellow to red and then gold sprayed on the top. Personalized metal bookmarks that I'll make. Like, yeah, crafting queen here, and I am all about that. So let's get on with it. Let's read chapter 1 of Mettle of the MasterMage. So there is a little prologue, which I'll skip for this reading, and we'll just go straight into chapter 1. So when you're sitting comfortably, okay. I hung from my wrists in chains suspended from the ceiling, shivering in the dark, cold cell. Goosebumps tracked up my bare chest and back. My toes brushed the floor, so I spent the time standing until my calf muscles gave out, or doing pull-ups, but it was getting rather inconvenient just standing here for so long. Leaving a prisoner was part of the interrogation tactics of the Duronians, but this seemed far longer than their prescribed period of time. Perhaps they'd changed from one turn of the glass to 3. It certainly felt like it. My father's description of each country's interrogation style played in my mind. Rush will use their heat, Skynians will be hands-on. Duronians leave their prisoners, solitary confinement being the highest form of torture, but Oberotians are the worst. Upholders in Oberot could seize a person's assets, leaving them needing to sell themselves into slavery in order to survive. At least that wouldn't happen to me here. I shifted my weight and prepared to complete a score more pull-ups. What time was it? How long did I have left before the cell door screeched open? At last! I raised my head, my neck and shoulder muscles protesting, and saw from the long suspension. 2 men walked in. The minister was short, as Duronians typically were, and dressed neatly in fine dark silks with his badges of office prominently displayed along his collar. Behind him came an equally short but hulking brute of a fighter, wide with muscles from wrestling and dressed less neatly. I nodded to the fighter, professional to professional. He stared impassively back and cracked his knuckles. So it was going to be like that. I take it you're ready to talk? The minister asked in Duronian. Not particularly, unless you had a specific subject in mind, Minister, I replied, using the polite form of Duronian. The minister raised his walking stick. I braced myself for a slap, but instead he whipped it around and poked the end against my chest. These tattoos, what do they mean? I can't tell you exactly, but I can tell you my rank and name. I'm Ranger Shardson, sir. Well met. I bowed my head and kept it lowered for the required amount of time. Really, I should be bowing from the waist to a minister, but as I was chained to the ceiling, it was the best I could do. The jewel on my shoulder buzzed angrily. The minister frowned at it. What is that? My deepest apologies, I'm getting a missive. Would you be so kind as to excuse me? Thank you. I dipped my head and pressed my cheek to the carmine soul jewel and let my thoughts spool free as the dungeon faded from my consciousness. Yes, I thought. Hi, Evan said warmly. Evan. A wave of love flooded me, so strong I smiled. All okay? She asked, her thoughts threaded with the nervous tension. Yes, they were very late in coming to interrogate me, but I think we're nearly done here. Okay, well, she's getting a bit frantic. My stomach fell, but it couldn't be helped. I wouldn't want that. I'll be there soon, Evan. Okay. Oh, have you seen my hat? The posh, fluffy one. The minister struck me across the stomach with his cane. I pulled the pain back quickly from the bond. I would never want Evan to feel my pain. I have to go. Perhaps have a look on the tall shelf in the wardrobe. I can't. I'm too small. Oh, Thorn, be careful, she said, breaking the connection. Ow, I complained under my breath. The minister, red-faced now and quivering with indignation, poked me again in the gut. Stop messaging people. I'm talking to you. Yes, I'm terribly sorry. Today is back-to-back for me. Kind of an important day. Right. Sorry. I'm back in the room with you. Where were we? The minister pushed the tip of his cane under my chin. I asked what you're... Oh, yes, the tattoos. Right, yes. I'm a ranger. His eyes narrowed slightly, no flicker of recognition in them. What's a ranger? I'm glad you asked that. There are a few points of information about them that you should know. I cleared my throat. It was dry being so long without water. Number one is that I'm an elite fighter. I am objectively the best fighter in Oberot, and I say this modestly. Well, maybe with a bit of pride. Number two is I don't belong to a contingent. I can fight with one, of course. I'm not a sergeant, but not quite a second. I can command troops on a battlefield until someone more qualified turns up, but at base, I answer to the sergeants. I set an example of respect and integrity to all the men commissioned or otherwise, and I help plan maneuvers. Number three is I get to develop the Ranger code and their maneuvers. I'm really excited about that last one because I'm integrating things from all over the world, and I would love to talk to someone about the Duronian maces. I tried a smile. The minister and his man were impassive. We'll park that discussion for later then, I said, shifted my shoulders. Ouch, getting a bit achy here, sorry. I cocked my head, listening and finally hearing exactly what I wanted to hear. I said, the fourth point of information is the best one of all. The minister glowered. And what is your fourth point? I grinned. I'm not the only ranger. There was a pop of air and Orbin appeared in the room, spinning and slashing with his battle mistress blades. He'd opened a portal between the worlds to ping through the stone walls. The big man jumped back with an oath as Orbin slashed him, backing up to protect his charge, but it was already too late. His eyes rolled up in his head and he crashed to the floor, completely unconscious from the somnus root on Orbin's blades. Took you long enough. While I voiced the complaint, truly I was delighted to see him at last. I have Tuniel calling me every 5 heartbeats. Look, here she is again. Orbin shook his head in disgust as he pulled out a lodestone from his ranger leathers. Hello, Tuniel? Are you with him yet? Her voice rang around the cell. Yes, and he's hale and well. Thorn, say hello. I raised my voice to say, well met, MasterMage. Well met. Well met. Her voice reached a timbre I seldom heard except in birds. I winced. She continued, today of all days. Get here right now. Arrgh! She snapped off the connection. Excuse me, I said to the minister. As you can see, I'm late for my next engagement and it's very important. Please, would you give my partner the keys to these manacles and I'll be back later. The minister backed up against the wall, sweat rolling down his face and eyes wide. I don't think that's a yes, Orbin said in Oberotian. Duronian was the only language he did not yet speak fluently. As my mother had once been a Duronian noble, I had more than a passing grip on the language, using the formal and informal forms readily. I said, he's having an evaluation of his life choices up to this point. Give him a heartbeat or two. Orbin put his hands on his hips. You don't have a heartbeat or two. The travel mage is waiting outside, and if Tuniel has to come here to get you, she will not be best pleased. Fine. I heaved, bringing my legs up and over my head, stomach and back muscles screaming. I held my shoulders immobile and placed my feet flat on the ceiling, then pushed off. The chain ring popped out of the ceiling, and I fell to the floor with a crash. Coughing from the stone dust that showered me, I rolled to my feet, dusting myself off. Ow. Show off. Orbin helped brush my shoulders down, quick eyes no doubt checking my range of mobility and for any lasting damage from the long suspension. I grinned at him. Don't fret, I have shoulder muscles, which were tested beyond the limit of breaking, I do recall, Orbin said, his voice colder. From long association, I knew it was because he was upset at the memory, not at me right in this moment. Aubin could be hard to read, but Evan and I were becoming more and more fluent in his language every day. I bowed to the minister. Thank you for your hospitality. I tugged Aubin to a halt, jerking my head towards the dignitary. 3/4 bow for the minister, Ranger. Swallowing his protest, Aubin essayed a perfectly placed and timed bow, then pinged us out of the cell. Do you have my clothes? I asked him. Washed, pressed, ready. Aubin's nose wrinkled slightly. You're filthy. I tried sniffing my upper arm. I don't suppose I have time for a bath? Aubin raised an eyebrow at me, quickening his pace. Do you want to spend the rest of your life hearing about this? Because Tunyal is going to bring this up every chance she gets for the foreseeable future. How a bath was more important to you than fine, I get it, I said. Lifting my hands in surrender, the manacles jiggled. Spring these for me? Aubin twisted the manacles around, frowned, and got out his picks. In several short heartbeats, they sprang open. Cheap make, Aubin grumbled. Dropping the chains to the floor, I shook out my hands. They don't buy mage work here, I take it. Budget craftsmanship, Aubin said with a scathing edge. He was a spendthrift in general, but there were certain items he strongly believed should be bought at the highest quality. I mentally added restraints to that list. The travel mage paced in the courtyard, skirts swirling round her ankles as she turned towards us. Her eyes were wide with panic. Sirs, please hurry, she said. The MasterMage is on my lodestone as we speak. Yes, we're making all haste. I shoved my arms into my shirt and pulled my dark red jacket on, doing the buttons up with only moderately shaking hands. Aubin noticed, the side of his mouth quirking up into a half smile. I grinned back at him. Well, how do I look? He reached up to straighten my collar, then scowled at the left side of my face. Is that the start of a black eye? Just a little one. He shook his head as he handed me my father's sword. Grasping the familiar weight with something akin to solace, I buckled it on and set it on my hip. Ready, I told the mage. She worked her magic with obvious relief, the winds of travel surging around us and messing my already sweat-stained hair into an unsalvageable mess. In less than 10 heartbeats, we were standing in the castle courtyard inside the ring of stones Tunyal had set up. These stopped stray or rogue transport mages or mancers from entering the castle, a security risk special forces were always alert against. Mixing magic with defense meant to protect against magic sounded ill-advised, except we knew we could trust the Mastermage. Even Captain Barley approved, and he was charged with the security of the royal family at all times. The castle courtyard was abuzz with mid-sun activity, servants hurrying, girls and boys in white livery darting around, and visitors tentatively asking directions of the stoic men and women in green posted on the gates. A pair in Special Forces red walked by on patrol, their short swords sheathed but hands on the pommels ready. Hurry! Prince Gurley waved on the castle steps, ushering us in. I'm coming. I looked him up and down as we jogged to the top of the main stairs, a stream of youngsters released from lessons, yelling as they fled in the opposite direction. You look great in the blues, I said, picking my collar. It was probably getting grimy. I hated putting new clothes on dirty skin. My thanks, friend. His silence in return pointed directly at his thoughts on my own appearance. Gurley, prince of the neighbouring country Dinay, was thoroughly incapable of lying. Will you stop worrying what you look like? Aubin said, following close on my heels. Save your breath for the climb. We raced up to the top of the stairs, my already hammering heart now threatening to come out of my throat. I was a swordsman, unfazed by any obstacle and trained to charge headlong into danger, whenever needed. Today was unprecedented, but I kept a firm control of my body, walking swiftly down the corridor toward the royal apartments. I flashed my identification tattoo at Gavain to be let past the doors. He glanced down at it, gaze sliding back up to my face, and then at Aubin. We hadn't spoken since he came to our aid in Skyn and confronted Aubin directly. Aubin had stabbed him, meaning to kill him way back in Dinay, and King Gav told everyone Aubin had been tried and executed for attempted murder. Gavin seemed to accept Aubin was a alt version at the time, but he avoided speaking to me in private, and I was constantly out on missions with Aubin with little downtime in between, so I couldn't confirm his thoughts. His face gave nothing away, but he stood aside, chest out in a perfect ready stance, his conditioning returning now that his heart had been replaced. In here! My sister Sylvia waved to me, gesturing to the closed double doors leading to the royals' living room. She trotted beside me, brushing off my jacket lapels and straightening my collar, pursing her lips with concentration. I suppose you'll have to do it. Cannot wait a heartbeat longer. I did not often embrace my sister, but it felt right to do so now. My thanks, Sylvia. She turned my chin to face her. Eyes swimming with tears, she said, Father would be so proud. I smiled back, but doubt trickled cold as water into my stomach. The last my father had seen of me, I'd refused to bond with Evan because of flawed preconceptions. I'd changed and grown, but his final memory of me was the poorest of my entire life. I deflected her assertion. You look wonderful. She did, a new dress in rich Oberotian red, matte and soft like velvet. This dress? The invitation was rather at the last possible moment, Thorne, so I had to use my midsummer gown. She smoothed the skirt, pinching the folds. I'll have to put another order in, and my favourite seamstress is already booked for moon cycles. She shook her head and settled a smile on her face. Never mind, a problem for tomorrow. Wait until you see Evan, she said, but to Aubin. He cleared his throat, ears blushing pink. Sylvia gave a throaty chuckle before pausing at the doors to the living room. Ready? Always, I asserted, hand on my father's sword. Sylvia and Aubin opened the door with a flourish. I offered my arm to Sylvia and marched ahead, Aubin falling in by my side. The royal living room consisted of a wide space with a waterfall for the King's Lake trickling through and tumbling out over the balcony. The dining chairs and table had been pushed to the sides for today. Gawain Rogan sat with my mother Iston and her sole companion Roche, and my father's sole companion Istadella. They all looked a little shocked to see me, and I hoped it wasn't because of the grime from the cells. Sylvia disengaged halfway down and went to sit with her sole companion Bran, and next to him slid Gurley, who nodded as we passed. At the end of the room facing us stood Queen Ellesmere, radiant in white and shining with love, and in front of her paced my beautiful promised. Tuniel MasterMage's light green dress trailed to the floor, her silverine hair done up in a complicated metal diadem, studded with tiny soul jewels that glowed and sparkled. At the sight of her, my breath shortened, my chest swelling with overwhelming love. That she had chosen me, above all men, to stand at her side, despite my training as a swordsman to defeat rogue magics making me dangerous to her, lifted my heart beyond compare. I gave her a smile meant for her alone, although we were surrounded by my friends and family. Her lips thinned with displeasure. Oops. Perhaps she was put out. I was late. I shrugged one shoulder in response. Next to Tuniel stood Evan. She wore a knee-length light green dress, a dainty hat perched on her head. Both of her arms were wrapped around a thick, heavy ledger. She tried to wave with one hand, but then she had to catch it again. I knew she'd be happy with a book in her hands. I walked down with Aubin and kissed Tuniel on the cheek. MasterMage. Ranger. Her nose crinkled. I inwardly winced. My apologies. I didn't have time for a bath. Despite that, she leaned towards me. You smell of stone and metal. Is that good? Maybe, she murmured. My smile widened into shared joy, imagining tonight's activities, and she smiled back in return. Well met, Queen Ellesmere began, and the room settled to face her. I straightened up to parade rest and put my arm around Tuniel's shoulders. She leaned into me ever so slightly, her cold fingers wrapping around my hand. This was the first time she signaled the affection between us in front of anyone. I treasured this moment, for I would be unlikely to get another. As the MasterMage, the leader of the magical community, she was a target for ambitious mages and mancers, and determined to keep her love for us hidden. I could feel it anyway, in the care she took to keep attention away from us, as well as Armare, the magical armour lodged in my shoulder, which repelled attacks against me. Ellesmere looked at us both, her bright blue eyes shining with love, and spoke in the sonorous voice. We are all gathered here to witness and celebrate the joining together of two houses. Thorne Shardson, Ranger of Oberot Castle, also of House Selesky of South Duron, to Tuniel MasterMage, formerly Nedant's daughter of Northhold. Ellesmere looked to the side. Who here speaks on their behalf? Aubin and Evan raised their hands, she on my side, he on Tuniel's side. The heavy book slipped out of Evan's grip. Aubin dipped forward, grabbing the bottom. They lifted it together, Evan going pink with embarrassment. Who speaks for Thorne Shardson? Ellesmere asked. I do, Evan said, stammering. Public speaking was not her milieu, but fortunately she would have little to say. I reached out, giving her hand a reassuring squeeze, and her disquiet settled along the bond, dissipating against my pride in her courage like the force of a wave of water dissolving against solid rock. Ellesmere gave her an encouraging smile before turning to face Tuniel's side. And who speaks for Tuniel MasterMage? I do, Aubin's voice said, voice clear and steadfast. Evan and Aubin would be negotiating the finer terms of this marriage contract, an Oberotian tradition that Evan found distasteful in matters of love, yet were essential in building a foundation for a family. May you find favourable terms and fair terms, Ellesmere said. Now that the contract formalities were out of the way, we could get to the good part. I took a bolstering breath, surrounded by the love of my heart's partner, as well as the support of my sole companion and my closest friend. The Queen raised her chin to meet my gaze. Shardson, do you enter into this agreement freely and of sound mind? Yes, I said. Good, Tuniel murmured beside me. Ellesmere said, MasterMage, do you enter into this agreement freely and of sound mind? Tuniel replied, yes. Her response, so simple yet so profound, sank deep into my psyche. My eyes prickled with tears, and I clutched her close. Then let it be recorded in the ledger, Ellesmere declared. She turned to Evan, and her starring moment had arrived. Evan opened the official marriage ledger of Obrot City to a blank page with a few loose sheafs of paper on top of it. On one of these, Ellesmere wrote our names and the date and passed Tuniel the pen. She signed it TM, and I followed suit with TS. I hoped the S was not backward, but a quick glance at Evan showed she was pleased with my imprinter. You may now kiss to seal the contract, Ellesmere said. Taking my wife's hands, I pulled her into my chest, letting go to wind my arms around her strong shoulders and bring her as close to me as I could get. Her ice blue eyes soft with love, she tipped her head up for our first kiss as man and wife. Pressing my lips to hers, I sank into the cool softness of her embrace, her hands pulling on my jacket lapels to deepen the kiss. Cheers rose up around us. So there you go. That's chapter 1. And probably quite interesting to start on a wedding, right? Because it's usually a wedding means that everything's fine now, everything's cool, everything's going to skip off into the sunset. But yes, maybe not. So yes, you can grab hold of a copy of this via the Kickstarter. That's the best way to get a copy quickly. And also, if you're missing anything else from the series, there's a bunch of add-ons and different tiers and things like that that can get you exactly where you need to be. But yeah, thank you so much for listening. And I hope you all have a lovely day. Goodbye.